Cooper, how are you today? I believe you have a video you're going to screen share with us. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that is correct.
Great. And when you do that, please, and you probably already will, make sure you click that sound, share the sound box when you go
Okay.
to screen share, because I feel like Zoom changes and moves that box placement every time I log on.
Yep. It says that I cannot screen share while you're sharing.
Oh,
So
well, let's try that again. Sanmai, can you make sure that Cooper can share their screen? Voila. Okay, great. And I'll be here ready for you when the video concludes. Cool.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cooper Kidd, and I use they, them pronouns. I'm a non-binary, transracial adoptee of Korean descent who is also disabled. I'm here today to talk about navigating cis-normative tech spaces as a non-binary person of color based on my own experiences. There will be time for questions at the end of this talk, and I hope that this talk helps you in some way. So let's begin. Here's a little bit more information about me. For visual access, I'm wearing a white button-down shirt with a suit jacket on top. I'm also wearing headphones that are black and have a light brown complexion with dark brown eyes and black hair. I hold a master's in information management from the University of Maryland, College Park, which is located outside Washington, D.C. I grew up in the D.C. area and have lived many places, including the Bay Area, North Jersey, and currently live in Philadelphia. I currently work for Barclays Bank as a technology analyst and have a background working in healthcare and higher education with mostly LGBTQ plus identified individuals. My background with LGBTQ plus work informs how I approach my work, and my identity influences how I navigate all aspects of my life. I also think it is imperative to acknowledge my privilege when having conversations, because we cannot have a talk with me as a speaker without me acknowledging my privilege. I'm a light-skinned East Asian person with a master's degree from a well-known university in the United States. I'm also a United States citizen, which makes it easier for me to get a job as I do not require sponsorship. I also have financial backup and support, which means I have agency to choose a job that is well suited for me versus any job that comes along. These are just some points of privilege that I have that I want to acknowledge so you can understand where I come from, and you can maybe have a better understanding of how I operate and why I made some of the decisions I did. I also believe that acknowledging privilege helps us to better build community and strengthen relationships. As stated previously, I work at Barclays Bank, which is a multinational universal bank based in London in the UK. I am a technology analyst, which means that I work in the technology sector at Barclays in a variety of roles. Investment banking has historically been very male-dominated, which can make it hard for any person who is not male to thrive. My role is sort of unique in that I am in a 2-year program where I rotate through different sectors of the bank. In my role, I've been on 3 different teams working on projects like large-scale moves of tech equipment, creating dashboards that showcase when different trading applications stop working, and I'm currently working within the Chief Data Office where I work on projects related to records management. Barclays was in many ways my first official foray into the tech world. While I held internships and did work during my master's degree program, I was not as immersed in the tech world as I have been at Barclays. And coming from spaces where my work in many ways revolved around my identity as a non-binary queer person, it was a bit shocking to work in an area where my identity is not at the forefront of my work. Moreover, it was odd to be in a space where my identity as a person of color was not something that was ever discussed. However, I will say that I have found doing work where my identities are not at the forefront to be liberating in ways I never anticipated. It can be exhausting to do work where your identity is so intrinsically intertwined, and doing work in the tech space has become a welcome relief for the time being. However, my identity, background, and access did help me enter the tech world, and you too can likely use your identities to your advantage. Many companies like Barclays are actively trying to diversify their workforces, which means that they're often actively seeking for historically underrepresented folks in tech, such as non-binary people and people of color. In fact, I applied to work at Barclays during the second fall of my master's program at a conference called Grace Hopper, which is a conference for women and non-binary technologists. Barclays was there actively recruiting, and while I did not feel super qualified for the role, I applied anyways and received an offer. I once heard a statistic about how cis white men often apply for roles they're not qualified for. So if they can do it, so can you. As a mentor once told me, aim to have as much confidence as a cis white man. This advice has greatly helped me feel confident to do what I need and push me forward throughout my career. I will also say that most things can be used as a strength, which for me includes using my identity as a strength. I have found that having to work harder than some of my peers has made it so that I'm more determined to succeed. I'm also sometimes better able to come up with novel strategies because my background has made it so that certain things are not just handed to me, and I have to use out-of-the-box thinking to find solutions to problems, such as how to call out and in a coworker who does not use my correct pronouns, or a coworker who has said some racist things that many of my white or cisgender coworkers do not have to. Using out-of-the-box thinking is a huge asset in the tech space, where disruptions to the status quo mean more gets done and often better. You can succeed, and I hope that you do. When I interviewed at Barclays, I was very upfront about my identity. I have a personal website that is listed on my resume that has my pronouns on it. My pronouns were also on my resume. It's also harder for me to hide my identity, as much of my previous work is with the LGBTQ+ community, and people make assumptions even if they do not mean to, and having a lot of work with the LGBTQ+ community can lead people to assume you are part of that community, regardless of if it is true or not. However, you may want to not disclose at the interview if you are worried that it will negatively impact you. On the flip side of that, though, is that you may not be able to tell how friendly a company will be towards non-binary and LGBTQ+ people, something that you can sometimes tell at an interview. During the interview, it is important to also remember that you are interviewing them. You can ask questions about LGBTQ+ protections, affinity groups, and support to learn more about the company. They may not tell you, but sometimes you can get a vibe, which can be very useful. You can also use your network or Reddit or other listings to learn about the company's approaches to LGBTQ+ and trans people, as well as people of color's experience of the company. Websites like Glassdoor and Fishbowl can be very telling too. Using your network or the internet or both to learn more is something that I cannot emphasize enough. When I started at Barclays, I knew that they had been lauded for their diversity initiatives and workforce inclusion, which was appealing to me. I wanted to work somewhere where I knew that I would be able to be myself in the workplace and not have to fight to feel that way. Many companies are moving in this direction too, which makes it a little easier to find a workspace as a non-binary person. You can often find if companies have been awarded for their diversity initiatives as well as what they are doing to increase diversity. The Human Rights Campaign, or as is more commonly known, the HRC, for instance, has ranked companies based on their policies for LGBTQ+ employees, and this guide is accessible on their website for free. There are many other such listings too that can help you determine if a company is a potential good fit for you as well, and these are easily found with a quick Google search. While these listings are not going to tell you everything, they are a good place to start. You can also use these listings and online sites to learn more about companies' policies around many other things that may be useful for you, such as their policies for disabled employees, for instance. I cannot state how helpful searching for these items was before I accepted the offer from Barclays. These are also good ways to look into initiatives for race-related topics at work too, which is vital to navigating the tech world, because it is harder as a person of color, and you do not want it to be harder than it has to be. As a trans person who is also disabled, I also found that it was important to look into healthcare coverage before accepting a job, because I wanted my care to be covered by my insurance. To do this, I had the recruiter I worked with email me the healthcare and policies for other coverage offered by Barclays, as well as information on short-term disability and other things I thought were important. It is important to look at all angles before taking a job. We are all extremely capable people with a lot of potential, and we need to look out for ourselves and each other. Lifting people up is a great way to live. After I found out more about Barclays and decided that I was going to take a job with them, I knew I needed to figure out how to navigate Barclays as a trans person of color who is also disabled. I know that transphobia and bias exist in all spaces, and I wanted to be as prepared as possible. I also want you to be as prepared as possible, which is why I decided to do this talk. It is important to note that tech spaces are not the only spaces that are cis-normative either. In fact, most spaces are, but there are great ways to navigate these spaces, which I will delve into here. However, this is not to say that I have not had some troubles. Some of my coworkers struggle with pronouns, for instance, and I've had to gently remind them of my pronouns by having conversations with them. I also make sure to put my pronouns in my email, and they are visible when people message me in Teams because they are on a status message. I try to make it as easy for others to see my pronouns and be reminded of them as possible, as this helps both them and me. I've also faced racism and hardship in the workplace from people telling me that I speak good English for someone from China, when in reality, I'm not even from China or Chinese, and trying to connect me with coworkers based simply on our race and gender identity, which, while nice in thought, can come across as a bit problematic. While these circumstances have and certainly do happen, I think it is important to also focus on actionable ways to navigate these spaces, which has included these events. In fact, part of dealing with these events was made easier by having an external network of people I could turn to for help and guidance in these situations. One of the most valuable ways I have navigated cis-normative workspaces as a disabled queer person of color was to have an external network of folks that I can turn to for support. Having an external support network has been an imperative aspect in many aspects of my life, not just here. I just had surgery, for instance, and this network was so incredibly supportive in helping me with that as well. An external support network can be helpful in work situations because your friends and mentors who are not involved with your work can provide support that your coworkers may be unable to provide. You can also discuss things with them that you may not want to discuss with people you work with, which can be very helpful. I've relied on my external support network to vent, ask for support, and brainstorm solutions with, which has been very helpful. Now I know that it can be hard to build an external support network. The main way that I have found to build community is by joining local groups for people of similar identities and lifestyles. Moreover, I have found sometimes the best people to talk to are the people who do not work in tech and who are white and not trans. Another important way I have found to navigate cis-normative workspaces is to build a community and get involved at work. I am really involved with certain initiatives at work, such as with the Early Careers Working Group, which has helped me build community with colleagues my own age. I have also been involved with the LGBTQ+ working group, where I've met other colleagues, including some who share being both non-binary and non-white. Building a network of people I can rely on and share with at work has been really helpful in helping me learn many of the skills I'm talking about here today. It can also be really helpful to have mentors who work with and garner ideas from to help me make my workplace a better one for myself and others. My mentors have taught me how to push back against cis-normativity, such as by including my pronouns in my status on Teams, feeling comfortable introducing myself with my pronouns, and standing up for myself. And now, when microaggressions, bias, or discrimination show up at work, I'm better able to ask for help dealing with it from others above me, or saying that those things are not okay. Having a community at work is incredibly important and helpful, especially as someone who the workplace is not often made for. While it is not your responsibility, it can be helpful for your colleagues to be educated on issues facing people of color and trans folks. It can also help them to learn about bias and microaggressions. These can be great topics to bring to your workplace for further training for your colleagues, and educational opportunities that you can help with if you so choose and want to. It can be important for your colleagues to see trans and people of color take charge and stand up. More non-binary trans people of color are needed in leadership roles in tech, because if technology is going to be truly made for everyone, everyone must be included, which means leadership must be as diverse as the people who the products are meant to serve, which should be everyone and not just a select few. And let's not forget about self-care and the importance of taking care of yourself. The world is very hard, especially right now, and it is important to take a break, sleep, eat, relax, spend time with friends, do what you need to do to thrive and not just survive. Being a non-binary person of color in tech can be exhausting, but it can also be really rewarding. I hope that we can work to create more equitable and inclusive spaces for everyone. And now I want to take time to answer questions from you. Feel free to ask anything on your mind, and if I can answer it, I will. I have deliberately left plenty of time for questions because I know that I could not have possibly covered or thought of everything either. I also think it is important at gatherings like this to take care of yourself, and if that means leaving now, I will not take offense. I also aim to end a little early so that you will have some time to regroup before the next session. So now we can pause the recording and I will answer questions live.
Thank you for that, Cooper.
Oh yeah,
And where are you dialing in from?
I am in Philadelphia, in
Ah,
Pennsylvania.
okay, great. Yeah, I'm over in New York, not too far. So for anyone that has any questions listening in to Cooper's chat, please feel free to drop them in the chat now, and we will relay those questions over to Cooper. In the meantime, I'll get us going. So I really appreciated your chat there and how you've navigated different challenges at times, with people either potentially doing something intentionally or unintentionally, whether it was racism or misgendering or using the wrong pronouns, any of these things. What is it for others, let's say folks that want to be allies, that are witnessing some of these things, and they know whether they have a pretty good idea that something is not going well, but they're afraid to say the wrong thing or overstep? What would you suggest to these allies that want to help but don't know how to?
I think one of the biggest things is like assessing the situation. So often people who are marginalized often don't want to say anything, particularly in work settings, because to say something could be jeopardizing your job. It could be calling out, your supervisor or someone you have to continue to work with post the event, right? So oftentimes for people who are on the outside, so people who are trying to be allies, things that can be done that I think are really helpful are redirecting. So if you notice that someone has said something racist, and sometimes people really don't want to call these people out for the same reasons that the marginalized person does not, right? This could be your boss too. You don't want, like, some people don't necessarily want to place themselves in that position, but you can always try to redirect the conversation. And often comments that are like racist, homophobic, transphobic, or just like in the realm of anything problematic are things that are not really like super related to the conversation. They're just things that people have decided are like what they're going to say because they may or may not have anything else to say at that time. So you can kind of redirect back. So if you're talking about a work project or something, you could always just say, oh, okay, well, let me move back in around X, Y, and Z portion of the project. Is there anything that we can do to, about that? If you notice misgendering, you can often just be, redirect by saying like, oh, Cooper said this, they, and try to redirect in that way where it's not necessarily calling them out, but it's a little bit more subtle. And sometimes people do get the hint and sometimes people don't, right? But I think with repetition, people do eventually like understand certain topics more. And then I think also if you're in leadership, encouraging your team to, go to diversity trainings, go to learn about more people and more topics, right? Because the more education that people have, the more likely that they're not going to do things like that. And there are sometimes people feel like there's too many training. I work in baking. There's too many trainings. We have so many mandatory trainings. How could you add another one, right? You can make it like a team building activity. Like on this day, we're going to go to a pride event, or like on this day, we're going to go to this event for, we did this once, like we're going to go to this event that features these Black leaders at Barclays, right? And so really structuring it in ways that are more like not like an online, you sit on your computer for more hours or, have to take off more time from your day-to-day task and then have to work later because of that. But things that just like make things seem more like a team building activity or just more enjoyable, right? And you can always, there's always events. I mean, we live in an era of plethora of events. There's stuff online at all times. You can always, find something. And if you can't, there are probably people in the organization who can find other events, right? Workplaces are not monolithic and people know all sorts of other people. And you can always also bring people in.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate the advice about the redirection when you were talking about that first half. And I'm curious, when you've been in that scenario, and perhaps someone has done that for you, do you, and this is maybe more of a personal question rather than advice for others, do you appreciate like a follow-up with that ally? Like if they came to you and they were like asking for your feedback and how they did, or what's the best way for the next step for the ally?
Yes, I think sometimes like that can be really helpful when people come afterwards. They're like, can you tell me like if this was something you appreciated? I think that there's a flip side of this though that I've also experienced where people are like, didn't I do a good job? And I'm like,
Yeah, yeah,
this is like not like a super help. Like this is not what the
yeah.
conversation they want to have. Like, you just went through a microaggression. Now someone is trying to give you like who wants your congratulations, right? And that's like a very icky situation. So I think just, if you're genuine in how you're going about it, that can be very helpful. But if you're really looking for like, did I do a good job? There are probably other people in the conversation that can tell you you did a good job that are not necessarily that person that's involved, right? And I've
Yeah,
also been on the flip side where I have redirected other people, right? And sometimes you never know if sometimes people are very stoic at work because, in a lot of workplaces, people are not feel that they can't be their full selves, right? So you have people who show no emotions, and you really do have to check in because if you don't check in, it just is very awkward, and you have no idea, if the next time this happens, were they appreciative that you checked in, or were they like upset that or were they appreciative that you stepped in, or were they just like shocked and appalled, right? Because different people have different experiences, right? Like my experience is not the same as your experience, so and it's really dependent and often this is why it's important to know your colleagues. Like if you work with somebody for a long time or even a short amount of time, people generally, if you know them well enough, know like what people want and don't want. And you can often gauge like, is this person someone who wants this called out? Because work with people who get misgendered at work, right? And they don't want anyone to say anything, right? They don't want it to be like their whole identity at work. It's just like a part of them. And they want to be known for their coding project that they did for you last week that was really great, right? They don't want to be known as the person who's telling you that their pronouns are incorrect every 5 minutes.
right. Yeah. That's such a good point. I'm curious you spoke to, this is not just a problem within tech, this goes beyond tech companies, but so speaking to maybe broader industry, how can companies create more inclusive environments, particularly for non-binary individuals, people of color, and perhaps that intersectionality as well?
Yes, this is something that I've thought about a lot because I do a lot of like early career stuff with Barclays. And so Barclays is not, I work in the tech side of Barclays, right? But Barclays is a bank. So there's a lot of other people that we interface with. And so I think one of the big things that companies can do are make sure that you have trainings, make sure that you have visible diversity, um, and make sure it's not just like diversity for diversity's sake, And I think Barclays does a really good job of this. Like we have a Diwali celebration, we have all sorts of like Lunar New Year, right? And making it very visible that like there are these employee resource groups that have money to host these events, and that really says something. If the bank is willing to give you money to host the events, that says that they value diversity in a lot of ways, right? So making sure that you have employee resource groups, that the employee resource groups are well funded and well resourced. And I mean, you can have an employee resource group and they can feel really like they're just there so that you can say you have Asian coworkers, right? Or they could be, in the case of Barclays, like very robust because like, the bank has put a lot of, money and time and effort into really building this, right? So just making sure that, if you have resource groups, make sure they feel like they're respected for that what the work that they're doing. Because oftentimes I've been in situations where I worked at LGBTQ plus center during my graduate time as a grad student, and it kind of often felt like we were just shoved into like things because they wanted visibility of the LGBTQ plus student population, right? And that's not necessarily what you want to go for. You want to go for, these people are actually supported and not just here as like a spokesperson for their, racial group, their ethnic group, their religion, right? So making sure you have employee resource groups, making sure that you have visible, visibility. I think and another thing that can be very important is what in the hiring process is really making this abundantly clear that you are valuing certain people and have things you can point to. Because if you're just like, we want more gay people, right? Like, what are you really asking, right? Like, are you just going to hire people because they're gay, right? That's also not great. Like, what if they're not qualified for your position, right? So stuff like that.
Yeah. What can you talk about more about the ERG's experience that you've had at Barclays and maybe some things that you've really appreciated or contributed to it, and also following up to that, how other folks maybe can make an impact if they're looking to start an ERG or join one, maybe as an ally or as something they want to identify as?
Yeah, so I'm really involved with the early careers working group at Barclays. So I've done a lot of events, making sure that we have these things called transaction cycles, and they're basically like business areas. And so we have them come in and they talk about their business area for a while, and then they have Q&A. So everyone who's early careers or mostly just like within the bank can come and learn about these areas that they may or may not have been exposed to. I mean, there's probably like 30 some areas, right? Like you work in one and you may never have met anyone in the 29 areas, or you may have met them and have no idea what their job is, right? And that's not very helpful if you're, trying to grow your base at work, right? And so one of the things that I think can be really helpful and Barclays does this is making sure that you do not have to identify as a member of the group to be a member of the ERG, right? And this is very helpful in a variety of ways, right? Like you could be not openly out and join the spectrum, which is our LGBTQ plus working group, right? And you may not be out for a variety of reasons. It may not be because your workplace is not supportive. It may just be because that's where you are in your life and you don't want people to know, right? And so you can join the groups. And I think setting them up like that can be very helpful. Making sure that people feel like they're supported and have time at work to go to the ERGs and participate is very helpful. And I have, in all of the roles I've had at Barclays, I've always had time to be involved in the employee resource groups, which is very helpful because I know some people who work at different companies and feel like they've never had any time to go anywhere else, right? Which is not very helpful. It's also a good way for you to meet people, and you can't meet people who share similar values or, identities, who are not in your immediate team. It can be very hard to build a community at work. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love hearing that. And if you could give yourself one piece of advice as you were starting your career journey into this space, what would it be if you could go back?
I think one of the biggest things I think would be just to be open to everything. There's a lot in the work world that you can learn, and just like be open-minded and like willing to try different things. There's so much to try, there's so much to do, right? And this does not mean you have to sign up for every ERG in existence or, sign up for every project, right? Like you need work-life balance, right? I hope most people value work-life balance. I do. And just making sure that you're really open and aware, I think, of like possibilities, different directions that your career can take, because I think when I first started working in general, I had a very strict career trajectory. And my career has not exactly followed the career trajectory in the way that I thought that it should. But that doesn't mean that my career hasn't been fulfilling. It doesn't mean that I've not met people that I really appreciate having worked with. And this doesn't mean that like every job or every opportunity that I've had has been the right fit. There have been certain things I've done that are not the right fit, and I've learned that very quickly or very slowly, which I think can be more painful. And then I think just like making sure that like I was open to all possibilities and like learning, and also this is part of it, is learning when to let go, right? If something is not working or serving me, like it is time to like let go. And that can mean stepping away from an internship, which I've done. It can mean telling people at work that the project that I'm working on may not be something that I may have started the project, and just being like, I genuinely like have no idea how to do this. Like I either really need help or someone else needs to take this over. And people are generally amenable when you're like upfront and honest that like, oh, like maybe I should have provided more support, or maybe you're just not the right person for this project. And that doesn't mean that like I do not do this with every project that I want, right? But if I have like a genuine like concern about like, the end product or end usability of something that I'm making, like I think it's really important just to be like open to like the possibility that like I may not be the person who's best suited for this, right? And that's normal and fine. Like we are not all suited to do everything, right? And even if you have a job that's X thing, like it doesn't mean that you're the best person at all times.
Yeah. Bringing a sense of humility to it and
Yes.
allowing ourselves to not be perfect, right?
Mhm.
Oh, maybe actually someone else should do this, would be better at this.
Exactly.
And I think, that can really, it's counterintuitive, I think, to maybe the way at least I was brought up, to say like, oh, like, it's like you're quitting, and that like it can be associated with failure, it can be a negative thing. But actually, when you're self-aware in that way and you can pass it off to someone, I think that's can be respected if you're in the right work environment. And then you're also giving someone else an opportunity.
Exactly. And I think that's really important, is like also just like making sure that other people have the same opportunities you do, right? Making sure that other people are visible and not, often, sometimes people want to take credit for things that they never did, right? or are given credit for things that they never did, and making sure that your colleagues have the credit that they need and, should have because they did the part of the project. Like sometimes people think that I did the project, and I'm like, no, like you need to give credit to these other people. And it often happens to women, right? And it also often happens to people of color. People are just like, oh, you didn't do this.
Yep.
They like, often people did do it.
Yep. 100% credit where credit is due. And that's being a good coworker. That's an example of being an ally. That's just another great example. Cooper, we're out of time. This has been absolutely fantastic. If people want to reach out and connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
I'm on LinkedIn, under Cooper Kid, or you can reach out to me via my website, which is cooperleekid.com.
Cooper, how do you spell your middle name?
It's Lee.
Me too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. How cool. All right, Cooper. Well, this is so lovely. And I hope we get to do this again. Thank you again for making the time.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.